Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, pending which I yield myself as much time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
H.Res. 298 provides for consideration of 2 measures, H.R. 734 and H.J.Res. 42. The rule provides for H.R. 734, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, to be considered under a structured rule with 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce or their designees, and provides for 1 motion to recommit. The rule also provides for consideration of H.J. Res. 42, disapproving the action of the District of Columbia Council in approving the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Amendment Act of 2022 under a closed rule with 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Oversight and Accountability or their designees. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this rule and in support of the underlying pieces of legislation. The Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act would reaffirm the principle of fairness and the opportunity within Title IX by specifying that sex shall be recognized based solely on a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth. I'm going to say something I never thought I would have to say on the House floor, in Congress, or anywhere for that matter, but here it is. Women and men are different. That's not meant to be controversial, mean-spirited, outlandish, or anything other than the factual statement it is. But perhaps I can be more specific, Mr. Speaker. Women and men are physically different. Women and men have different physical characteristics, and that's okay. That's why Title IX exists, to ensure that despite these differences, women and men have the same opportunities. Saying women and men are different does not lack empathy for people who struggle with their identity. But because some people struggle with their identity does not change facts. And speaking of the facts, I'd be remiss if I did not include some for the House to consider. Specifically in the context of athletics, one study coming from the Duke University School of Law's Center for Sports Law and Policy. They note the various differences between male and female athletes leads to a 10 to 12% performance gap between the sexes in athletic competition. Mr. Speaker, I would like to submit for the record the results of this study.
Without objection.
Now we will hear that this bill is a distraction or that it does nothing to address school safety issues, but I couldn't disagree more. We've seen women, strong women like Riley Gaines, speak to the real harm female athletes experience from the issues we're discussing today. For those who don't know, Riley is a former college athlete as a swimmer, just like my own girls at home who are swimmers. I had the chance to speak with Riley just last week. She shared stories on how this problem has been branded from the left as taking away inclusiveness, when in reality it's taking away opportunities from our female athletes. Women are becoming collateral damage. Riley told me stories about her competitor, a biological male, sharing locker rooms and showers with teammates, and how a year later, one teammate who was quiet at the time wrote letters to her about how the experience still traumatizes her. Riley also shared a story of how when that same biological male competitor won, she was asked to step away from the medal podium photo. The sport she loved had been reduced to a photo op. That's not progress. It's quite the opposite. Riley reminded me that her story is not unique. In fact, I have a list provided by Concerned Women for America where they've documented over 100 instances of women needing the type of protection that H.R. 734 would provide. So what do we know after all of this debate? We know that women and girls like Riley have to face legitimate safety and privacy concerns associated with sharing locker rooms with competitors of the opposite sex. Women and girls have to face physical safety concerns. For example, there's a story of a biological male in North Carolina participating in women's volleyball. This biological male spiked the ball so forcefully into the face of a female competitor that he seriously injured the young girl and caused lasting damage to her. Or the story of Tamika Brents, an MMA fighter who had her skull fractured and a concussion within 2 minutes of fighting a transitioned fighter, Fallon Fox. Women and girls have to face the lack of a level playing field and stolen opportunities that come with it. As Riley speaks to so eloquently, the fact that these biological men steal championships and associated opportunities from women, and she would know. Prior to transitioning, Leah Thomas, her competitor, was ranking in the mid-500s in the men's competition, but after transitioning and competing against biological women, finished first. If this does not illustrate the unfairness of allowing biological males to compete in women's sports, I don't know what will. Women who are Olympians and college All-Americans, we've also have to face the fact that biological men competing in sports meant for women and girls has the effect of discouraging them. These sports that are meant for women and girls, having to compete with men does act as discouraging. Because now they must face inherent unfairness of competing against biological men. We know that sports participation has incredible positive benefits for participants, both from a physical but also from a mental health perspective. And since this phenomenon of biological men participating in women's sports is relatively new, it is a problem that will only continue to get worse if we don't act to stand up on their behalf. Speaking of problems that will get worse if we don't act, I want to turn now to H.J. Res. 42. This resolution would disapprove of the District of Columbia's Council's Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Amendment Act of 2022. Plain and simple, H.J. Res. 42 is about backing the blue. In January of this year, the D.C. Council passed the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Amendment Reform Act, effectively making the job of our police officers even harder. And Mayor Bowser declined to sign or veto it, which allowed it to continue in the process, ultimately reaching here, the Congress, for disapproval. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to submit for the record 4 letters of support for H.J. Res. 42, disapproving of the D.C. Council's decision. 1 from the National Fraternal Order of Police, 1 from the National Association of Police Organizations, 1 from the United States Capitol Police Labor Committee, and finally 1 from the Commonwealth of Virginia's Attorney General.
Without objection.
It is this last letter from Virginia's Attorney General that I think makes an important point. Quoting directly from the letter, "Unfortunately, due to the proximity of our communities, D.C.'s crime problem has become Virginia's problem. What happens in the nation's capital certainly has consequences for our neighboring communities, but I'd also argue that it has consequences across the country. The decisions made here often affect decisions around the country and in other major cities. Therefore, we must think carefully when we review legislation that would allow outside groups to target individual officers and make it more difficult for those officers to do their jobs. We certainly don't want that to catch on. D.C., as of this month compared to last year, has had total crime rise 23%, seen homicides increase by 31%, and sexual abuse crimes rise a staggering 84%. Why would we be trying to implement measures alienating law enforcement officers? It's beyond me. We should be doing everything we can to show law enforcement officers that we stand with them, especially in areas where crime is on the rise and out of control. We should make it easier, not harder, for them to do their jobs. I urge my colleagues to support this rule. Our female athletes and police officers here in the nation's capital and around the nation. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Indiana reserves. The gentlewoman from New Mexico is recognized.
Thank you.